Greetings, fellow A-pushers. I'm Joshua Lee, and I did my project on the pre-Columbian societies. So in this video, we'll be discussing the lives of the Native Americans before the arrival of the Europeans. We're going to describe their tribe structure and organization, along with their technological development and the cultural differences between the Europeans and the Native Americans. The social and structural organization of the Native Americans were usually scattered and independent. They had many interconflicts with each other and usually had negotiations, had many conflicts and wars. They were far distance apart and did not have a social organization to band together when the European came. This is why they were weak and unable to fend off the European attacks. However, there were exceptions where the Indian tribes worked together as a unit instead of being scattered and weak. A famous example of these exceptions was the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois Confederacy consisted of 5 tribes in the New York state. Hiawatha was the famous leader of this group. They were matrilineal and the property was usually passed down through the mother line. Each tribe kept their independence, but however, they came together to discuss issues like war and other interests. Keep in mind, these cooperations between tribes were not common. Cooperations and formations like the Iroquois Confederacy proved great political and economic impact to the arriving Pilgrims and Europeans. Most Native Americans lived in a hunter-gatherer society in which they hunted for animals and gathered things like fruits from trees in order to survive. So they lived pretty much in sync with nature, and they had many tents, and the tribes gathered in something that was not a sedentary movement. Many of them migrated and did not have a civilization that stayed in one place. Despite the minority of nomads existing in pre-Columbian era, there were many complex societies that formed with different social norms and agricultural technologies. What made these societies so successful is the cultivation of corn. Examples of these societies would be the Mayans, Incans, and the Aztecs. The Aztecs has complex deities and multiple beliefs, and which had a polytheistic religion system. It has human sacrifices from war, and they also built step temples and pyramids in order to worship their gods. All 3 societies has the cultivation of corn, and many of them adopted the 3 sister farming system, which pretty much was the rotation of corn, bean, and squash in order to not deplete the soil resources and yield maximum efficiency for farming. The Incas had multiple irrigation and road systems in order to improve the irrigation and transportation. There were key cultural differences between the Native Americans and the Europeans. The Europeans believed in a concept called mercantilism, which made them love money and to exploit other countries. The natives loved nature and they felt it was sacred and people should not be dominating and exploiting nature. The natives also had little concept of money and had little interest in it. The Native Americans were polytheistic while the Europeans were monotheistic. They had many key cultural differences, especially regarding the one of private property. The Native Americans felt that nature was sacred and belonged to the different spirits ingrained into them, so they did not own private properties. However, the Europeans wanted to exploit land for power and greed. So that concludes my video about the pre-Columbian era. Thank you all for listening, and this is the end.